Hi, I'm Rob Price, and I'm talking to CEOs about AI. Welcome to Futurize.
I'm McCallion. I'm the chief exec of a business called Modelprop AI, and we offer AI services to the residential property market in the UK.
Mal, great to have you on the podcast, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation about agents for agents, which is a bit corny, but how can I not use that? Um,
100%.
it'd be good to kind of understand a bit of the things that you've done before, because I think one of the things that I'm really conscious of is this focus on verticalization of application of AI to particular markets. One of the key things is that deep understanding of that market, and I think you know a bit about that market from the conversations we've had.
Yes, by factor of age, I happen to do. So yeah, so back in 2000, I was one of the team that helped to launch primelocation.com into the world. This was obviously the very start of sort of the internet age, and then I was lucky enough to be on the team that launched Zoopla in 2008, again out into the UK residential property market. So I've been very focused for 26 long years now in the prop tech space, and yes, have been very excited, as one might imagine, by the arrival of AI and what that can actually do to this to this industry, and how we can help estates and lettings agents across the country to understand it, to deploy it, and ultimately to kind of be able to service their customers better through it.
And I think there's probably a kind of set of themes that I want to explore as we go through the conversation. I mean, the whole season this time is looking at practical use cases for AI and agentic AI in markets, and it's really interesting that this is a market that I imagine has got a lot of SME players in it as well. So it's not just big organizations with big IT departments deciding what they should be doing. This is a
Yeah.
whole range of different type of organizations, I imagine.
100%. So it is a very long tail industry, and I'm sure everybody listening in, if in this country, will be familiar with the high street, where there's sort of three or four estate agents that have been there forever, it would seem. But yes, the stats are broadly there's about 10,000 companies that are the estate and lettings agents in the UK, with about 20,000 offices. But that slightly masks the fact that about 80% are kind of one or two branch firms. So it is a very kind of, as I say, long tail. These agencies have earned their position and earned their place over many years. The transaction they're involved with is generally the most expensive transaction most people will ever do in their lives, and as a result, that need for a human intermediary has always been kind of uppermost. And I remember, going back to prime location days when the internet first came along, and there was every agent was just like, oh my God, this is going to be the end of us, peer-to-peer selling and all that sort of stuff. Fast forward 26 years later, spoiler alert, not a lot has changed in terms of their position in this transaction, because it is, the risk to a consumer of messing it up is so huge that in the end they do default to finding an expert to help them along.
And I think it's quite easy to maybe visualize some of the things around, well, bringing a property to life, for example. I've seen 3D tours, kind of virtual kind of things. I've no doubt I can now change it to be a nice sunny day if it was a cloudy day before, and things of that nature.
On
But
video as well, yes.
but I guess that's not going to fundamentally change the efficiency or the ability of an organization to well, I don't know, to scale or to deliver things with greater profit. Or what are the key drivers that those organizations are really looking to AI to help them with on the next stage of their journey?
Yeah, so I think within every good estate agency, and again that there are thousands and thousands of them across the country. There are kind of three real drivers for them and their businesses. The first is to win more what they call instructions. So these are the actual contracts with sellers or with landlords to advertise the property or to manage the property in the letting space. So how can they achieve more of those? How can they get ahead of their competition? And one of the interesting things about this industry is that it's not very flexible, in terms of people decide to move house for so many big life-changing reasons and macroeconomic reasons, that actually, going and advertising, say, move house more often, doesn't have any impact whatsoever. So the pie is kind of the size of the pie. So every agent is just much more about how do I get more market share? How do I, of those who are choosing to move, how do I make sure that my brand, my positioning is better than anybody else in the area. So that instruction winning, that market share growth is one of the big drivers. The second is as with most businesses, is how do I get more revenues? So if the pie is this big and I'm getting more instructions, actually can I increase my fees, or can I increase the ancillary revenue that I can generate from mortgages, from conveyancing, and so on? And then the third thing is cutting costs. So actually when I look around my business and look around the environment that I'm working within, then what are the levers that I can pull that actually will help to decrease my cost base? I think it's probably fair to say that that latter one has been largely a kind of focus when AI has started to come around. It's been like, right, well, actually, there's a lot of noise about how many people can we get rid of, and that's not the majority of agents kind of thinking that way. But actually, look, if AI is great at doing many of the administrative tasks, if it can actually look at the replicable, the kind of the repeatable processes and procedures within any agency and start to handle those, then can we look at how our people, actually decrease the number of people that we've got within the business, or redeploy that into the second of them, which is the revenue generation side. And we often talk in our business about getting the machines to do the machine jobs and get the humans to do the human jobs. As I said at the start, this is such an important transaction that people want to rely on that kind of human contact. So our job is really to help those agents to be able to move their people away from this, kidnapped by their screens, facing facing inwards all the time, to actually AI can do a lot of this stuff. Let's start to look up again and go out and build relationships. So that's a real kind of key part for us.
One of the things that I see as a repeated pattern in a lot of the conversations I've been having has been the ability to reduce elapsed timescale. It's slightly different from productivity because it's more about just doing things faster or getting things done faster. And it's been a long time since I've moved house because it was so painful last time. But
Yes.
my memory of that was there were some things that just took forever to happen, searches or kind of things of that nature. Now,
Yes.
logically, I would imagine AI can help there as well, and agents can help there as well. But it is dependent on an ecosystem of organizations wanting to do that rather than
Yeah.
an individual agency, for example. Is
Indeed.
that part of the conversation as well that's out
It,
there?
it is part of the conversation, but as you say, there are so many additional kind of stakeholders and dependencies within this process that the actual agents themselves often have a very small part in terms of making that more efficient. The average has ballooned to about 180 days at the moment, and that is because, as you say, searches are taking longer. There are much more checks for money laundering and know your customers, all that sort of stuff. So all of these additional responsibilities, conveyancers have got a lot more to focus on as well, and it's all chain dependent as well. So it's not necessarily just your process and your transaction that is going to speed things up. There are dependencies on 6 or 7 potential other transactions all taking place at the same time. And if anybody in those chains is not quite as technologically interested as you are, then there is, as I say, a limit to how that can do. That being said, when that process, putting that to one side, there are many things that you can do to get a property up onto the market much quicker, to actually secure the instruction much more quickly, and then to actually produce the assets and the things that are going to help you to market the property and to get to that point of exchange and then onwards towards completion. And that's really the kind of the kind of the things that we can affect, rather than the things that we can't affect. So yes, there are a number of things that within agencies, such as actually being able to just talk bullet points as you're walking around a property, and for it to then be the property particulars has been written, to take photos and for them to, as you say, be made to look slightly more beautiful very quickly as well, and being able to produce little videos that animate those images using AI, actually to have very clearly marked virtual stage virtually staged images of that property. If it perhaps it is a little bit tired, or if the tenants are still, in bed, then you can make all that sort of happen as well. Obviously, very clearly mark wherever the AI is present, because not only ethically, but also there are very clear rules around property marketing and making sure that it looks that it is as described. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of there's bits and pieces in there that can really help to speed those processes up. But I think that the kind of bigger win, and this is probably true for more many small medium enterprises, is it's actually the knitting together of the internal knowledge.
Yeah.
So how do you get your CRM system, so your agency software, which has property data and people data on it, and then your brand, and then your kind of vision, your tone of voice, and then ensure that all those internal documents, perhaps some spreadsheets that have just kind of been around forever, pulling all that together into what we call an operating system. I kind of think of it as a brain, essentially. For every business should have an AI brain that essentially pulls all these things together, and then it is available to drive out these AI videos to be able to answer an AI receptionist call that comes in when somebody wants to talk about a particular property. Is able to produce these particulars, and to send them up to the property portals and elsewhere. And those are the things, and to match databases, right? To actually kind of say, right, we've just got this property on the market. It is absolutely perfect for somebody that came in 6 months ago, that perhaps a human would never have been able to kind of match up, and so on. So there is a huge amount that can be done within this industry, within this market, that can help those things to speed through. But I do think the core of it is, whereas we have historically necessarily had humans doing a lot of the internal processing, and like I said, staring at the screens, having AI agents that are able to go and activate a lot of this data kind of gathering and this matching, I think is where the future lies.
So I think there's one of the things that I'm always keen to explore is language. So for people listening to this thinking, why isn't Rob and Mal talking about agents and agentic and inference and models and MCP and all kind of the language of kind of the new AI and agentic world? Of course, that's not necessarily going to mean anything kind of in the conversations that you will be having day in, day out with estate agents across the UK. For anyone listening outside the UK, kind of it's a UK kind of conversation.
Mm.
So how do you kind of do that bridge between this deep technological capability that is evolving at pace and kind of literally new things appearing on a weekly basis almost,
Yeah.
and establishing it in all those kind of business benefits and needs that those organizations have?
Yeah.
Where do
It's,
you start?
Yeah, so one of the things, as you've identified right from the word go, is if you start talking about AI agents, then every estate agent runs to the hills because they think basically AI is going to take over their jobs. And I'm talking about AI estate agents. So, we would, so I always talk about agentic AI, and we're very clear on that. It's agentic AI, not AI agents. But how I have perhaps always, but certainly in this particular era, talk to agents about technology and about kind of what's there is to kind of go out into their world and kind of speak to them where they are. So I've just finished a tour of the country where I went to 40 locations in 40 days, again across the UK. And had 5 to 25 to 30 agents in each meeting, where we were talking face to face about this remarkable technology and understanding where they were, where they could go. So that started with just some very sort of general chat GPT, how to build a custom GPT, and again, and for some people that was like mind blowing. Others were perhaps a little bit further forward. So then we looked at Claude Co-work, and we started to actually build out some landing pages for their particular areas that they were looking to target, and so actually Claude would go away and would build a branded page like on the fly within a few minutes. And again, that was blowing the minds of some of the others. And then we did kind of take it a little bit further forwards, and I'd show that my OpenClaw AI team that essentially were, and you could see them, that they could see that they were chatting, in Telegram and so on, and that, probably blew the rest of the room's minds. But yes, it's kind of, I think it's really important to kind of have almost that triumvirative where you kind of take people where they are to the next thing, so that it covers all bases and all different familiarities with the technology. But yes, we do talk about MCP, and we do talk about, as I say, agentic AI, and we talk about all the harnesses and so on, because I do think, as you know, and everybody listening knows, that this moves so fast that suddenly agentic is the word, whereas 2 years ago nobody had heard about it. Or, suddenly harnesses are now a thing, and more, agents, people, will be involved in conversations about that, and the earlier that they can actually kind of get a handle on it, perhaps feel a little bit educated and cognizant of what the power of this stuff is going to be, and then they go off and build their own custom GPTs. I think that was probably one of the biggest hits, was actually people being able to go and create a co-director of their business, that they could just basically bounce ideas off, and you just know straight away that people are going to be getting some significant value from that, and they can do it within a few minutes.
Absolutely. And funnily enough, a CFO friend of mine does exactly that. Kind of, it's almost his personal guide to, oh, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think?
Yeah,
I
so
mean, great to see a set of examples, because in a sense, there's always this curve, isn't there, in terms of where people can start and start experimenting and playing and understand what could be helpful. One of the earlier conversations we had on the podcast was with a guy called Frank Pivot, who was pre-open claw days, but in essence building an insurance business with one person and a bunch of agents. Now, I think one of the things there that we talked about was trust and motivation. It was kind of in a consumer focused services business, which fundamentally both of those markets are, then you have to obtain and retain consumer trust, because, as you said, it's one of the biggest transactions they'll ever do. So,
absolutely.
so they need guiding and helping through that process. Where do you see the right balance is in terms of from those conversations? There's probably a kind of, we could just have a podcast on those 40 kind of days tour actually, but if you were to wrap it up in a couple of points, what was the feedback that you got? What were people most excited about in terms of that? Where to put the, if you've got a slider on that scale of playing a bit to open claw everything, kind of where were people?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, and we did travel, like, from Aberdeen down to Truro, and kind of Wrexham to Canterbury, and all points in between. And the kind of feedback in general. Well, one of the things that I am very, very clear on is that in the world of AI, I consider trust to be the most important thing that you are going to protect. Okay, and I say this as well to the agents, because we are going to be, I mean, we already are in a place where some of the things we're looking at, we're going, I'm not quite sure if that's real or not, and that starts to kind of fray our confidence in ourselves, our judgment, and so on. And that's why, if you are putting things out there that are, completely different to what somebody is going to see when they go on a viewing of a property, then that trust bomb is going to hurt, and hurt hard. So yeah, I think that's that kind of element of trust, that the idea that you have to kind of epitomize that responsibility, and where you're using AI, and you can just say at the bottom, actually the AI has been used in this, rather than necessarily specifying that actually, you did the first draft in it, and then you kind of changed it afterwards. I think that's a really responsible way and a responsible use of AI. And I think for SME businesses out there, that's really, really important, because people are, there's enough of some negativity around AI that we hear regularly. People, you never know which person, whether they're pro, anti, or somewhere in the middle. So always be clear about where the AI has been used in this particular instance. But yes, going out into the towns and the cities of the UK, I do think that I found that the majority of people had used ChatGPT. I'd say probably about 40% had used Claude. Nobody had used OpenClaw at that particular time. And their willingness to trust the AIs was probably balanced about right. So they were concerned about the security of their data, obviously their consumer data and things like that. They were paying generally, and if they weren't paying, then I was telling them go pay, because then you can do the toggle that actually secures the data and make sure that it's not trained anywhere else. But yes, I think that there was there was a growing awareness, and I think we will continue to see that growing awareness of where the as you say, the kind of slider is between going all in and treading carefully. Perhaps it was quite a self-selecting audience because we advertised it as being about AI, so that they were slightly more perhaps sophisticated in their understanding of it than many others in the industry. But at the same time, yes, I think it was still very early in terms of the understanding. And as you know, Rob, this is going so fast. It's hardly a surprise. You kind of if you've got a day job which is not solely focusing on AI and you're selling houses, and there's like 6 months goes by and suddenly you're into Fable 5, and it's like, what? That's like insane. That's so bad.
It's such an important point that kind of you have to very much kind of step back and realize that kind of there's a difference between immersing yourself in that technology world and recognizing that not everyone does that because
Yeah,
they've got a job too and kind of doing the things that they're doing. Out of
yeah,
interest, did
exactly.
you find any regional variation? I mean, I know, or at least I think I know, that the Scottish property buying process is different from the one in England and Wales, but did you find any regional variation in how people thought about or had experimented with AI?
Do you know what? No would be the answer really. So perhaps one might argue that the London we did a couple in London, and that might be slightly more sophisticated, possibly because the sort of their clients are perhaps asking them about AI and what they're doing about AI, because they may work in one of those worlds of Google or Meta or something like that. So there was perhaps just a slight uptick there. But yeah, no, look, from Exeter to Dundee, there wasn't really that much in terms of differential in terms of understanding. As you say, the Scottish market is slightly different and much better, I would say, in terms of its ability to process house sales faster, and therefore, from a pressure point of view, from an opportunistic point of view, then I think perhaps they were much more open to looking at other things. But yeah, no, I think that for the majority of agents out there, and I probably hazard the majority of kind of small and medium enterprises out there, I think there is an awareness in general that this should be helping them and it should be a force for good. But there is this just almost the phrase AI is so big. We know that there are different types. There's generative, there's agentic, etc. But everyone just talks about AI, and that then just becomes this big kind of huge elephant. So to be able to kind of eat it one chunk at a time, and to be able to say, right, this is generative. That you can build a custom GPT, and that's all you need to do, because then just play with it and just see and understand and let it help you. And it's those kind of the sort of baby steps along the way, I think, that will lead people to more sophisticated levels of interest as well as usage, because at this point I think it is just so it's all just caught up in just two letters, isn't it?
And I've only just thought about this, but recognizing that we've got people listening around the world, um, I've no doubt that the property buying process is different in the US than it is to South America, is different to various countries in Europe, etc. But I imagine the principles, as you've described, in terms of helping small regional businesses, helping people through that process of making a big transaction, it's still going to be relevant everywhere, isn't it? It's the things that we're talking about today are not unique to the UK. It'll just be a UK variation of a common theme that's happening everywhere.
Yeah, exactly that. And this is the global AI kind of market industry, and people's understanding of it and ability to kind of access really straightforward, really kind of helpful either guides or people who understand their businesses, understand their markets, understand the kind of the pain points and the pressure points and what their problems are, and then mapping those mapping the AIs to the problems, helping to create the solutions. That I think is where the kind of humanity comes from and where the success comes from. Again, if you look at it at a global scale or a macro scale, forward deployed engineers from from the likes of OpenAI and Claude and Anthropic, going out into these businesses and actually essentially kind of helping them to understand it and then selling them it. That I see as the kind of model that we certainly are adopting here. Is actually, you've got to kind of go out into their businesses. AI is so flexible and able to be so personal to that particular entity, that particular business. I think I know all of them are, slightly tired of their big, you can have any color as long as it's black, SaaS products that are like, dumped on and said, right, there you go, you work out how to use it, off you go. And actually AI is much more like, yeah, okay, it can read the data from there, but it can also add in, your brand again, right? And I think, one of the interesting things, and perhaps it is not specific to the UK, because I think in every market there tends to be one big kind of dominant advertising medium. For the UK here is a company called Rightmove, and that's where most people go and try to start looking for their property. But because of the way that Rightmove operates, understandably, you've got a little box for this is your size of your logo, this is how many pixels you can have. It's got how many characters for your description of yourself as an agency, and that means that everybody kind of looks the same. And what I think is one of the real powers of AI, and one of the things that's going to be so good for SMEs, is it allows them all to be unique at scale. Okay, so actually AI is going to enable them to whatever their specific USP is. So perhaps they've been there since 1857, or perhaps they've won the awards for this year and last year and the year before, or they've got the person who's sold the most properties in the area. Whatever those particular competitive advantages are, AI makes it so much more straightforward to amplify those, and thereby help the customer that's really important to find the right match for them. And I think that's going to be a really interesting sort of outcome of the AI age, is that actually I think there's going to be so many more small and medium-sized enterprises that are able to just win on that specific niche that they're really focused on.
You've almost answered my next question before I've asked the question. But the thing that I was kind of wanting to explore was that kind of point around AI for growth, because
Mm,
what I'm finding is that large organizations that have got to kind of transform and change, that's hard because you've got so
yes.
many people involved. Whereas an SME or a mid-scale kind of organization can maybe just grab the opportunity and elevate what they do or scale what they do and grab an opportunity that maybe wasn't there before.
Mm.
Have you seen that ambition in the conversations that you've had? Are there people out there who are kind of recognizing that maybe this is an opportunity for them to drive an acceleration of growth that they just could not have achieved otherwise?
Absolutely right. Yeah, and again, this the agents that I've been out, and again, maybe the self-selecting agents who are perhaps AI curious, ambitious, want to understand what this technology can do for them. They go away, their heads brimming with ideas of what they can actually deploy straight away. And I think your point about the kind of corporate stuff is really important and well made. It's that the oil tanker, slow moving around and worried about, kind of risk, and knowing that, if the regulatory authorities are going to go after anybody, it's going to be the big guys. That they do have that fear and almost that kind of inertia, and understandably so, and necessarily so. That there needs to be that kind of that care taken. But what that does from the kind of long tail end, from the SME perspective, is the risk is less, and therefore the actual the ambition can be higher.
If you're thinking about, well, I mean, I think it's kind of applicable to any SME actually, but from the conversations that you've had, you must have left kind of each of those organizations or sets of people that you've talked to with a few tips, the two, three things they should do tomorrow different to help them on their journey. What would they be?
Yeah, so the first thing to do is try, go, do it. Test it out, play around with it. I think that there is a perhaps a tendency within all of us to think we can break things and all that sort of stuff, and it's just like, no, look, the only way that you are going to get the max out of this amazing technology is understanding it first of all and foremost. And so yes, so starting with whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Claude, and starting to just ask it questions, just start at that base level. The second thing is then to actually really think about what is the biggest time sink in your business right now? What is the thing that is taking the longest, that actually can be affected by this? So, in terms of processes, procedures, and really start to think about, well, actually, can I ask Claude how to do that better? And and we showcase, a lot of the, as you'll have seen, it's so good at just kind of answering, give me five things to do next for this particular problem, and it will bring through some ideas, some of which the agent will be using already, some of which they've tried and perhaps haven't have decided against, but some of them will be amazing and will help them. And then the kind of third thing is to really kind of say, right, what is it that you've kind of always wanted to do, but then always thought, I just never had the time. And there's probably, I think, for all of us, a kind of pile of things, ideas that almost, over the last 5, 10 years or whatever, we just thought, I'm just never going to get to that. It would be amazing, but I'm never going to get to that. And it's slowly kind of picking those off those sheets off the shelf and going, all right, well, if I try this and ask, Claude or whoever, Open Claude, to how this might work, then you as the expert in your business, you as the expert in your industry, probably know better ways of doing these things that you've just never thought were possible before. Now go ask the question, see if it has suddenly come within reach. And I think that's when things really start to get very exciting, because that innovation really starts to kick in where perhaps it wasn't there before.
Excellent. Mal, it's been a pleasure to talk to you about, well, your 40 towns and cities in 40 days. I have to ask what's next, just in terms of how do you beat that very quickly?
Yeah, just sitting very still, rocking backwards and forwards is very much next. No, so we will do this again, and then in 6 months' time, it's so powerful, it's so important, it's so useful, and in 6 months' time, we'll have something completely different to talk about as well. So that's for then. In the intervening period, there's so much that we're doing as a business, that is super exciting. We're launching a property portal, an AI property portal, called My Porter, and yes, it's just it's super fun, and yeah, we're very very fortunate to live through this time, aren't we?
Absolutely. One thing after the next. Excellent. Thank you.
Great to see you, Rob. Cheers.
Cheers.